Imagine it's late October in the Appalachian Mountains. The first frost has already touched the fields. A family stands beside a wagon loaded with potatoes, carrots, beets, cabbage, and apples. Together, the harvest weighs hundreds of pounds. Now, imagine what happens next. There is no refrigerator, no freezer, no grocery store 10 minutes down the road. No way to replace what you've grown. Every potato that rots is food lost. Every apple that spoils is one less meal during winter. And yet, Appalachian families routinely ate food harvested in October all the way into spring. Some vegetables lasted 4 months. Some lasted 6. Some survived nearly 8. How? The answer wasn't a machine. It wasn't electricity. It wasn't even ice. It was a hidden underground system that quietly maintained temperatures between 32 and 40 degrees Fahrenheit, using nothing but soil, stone, airflow, and the natural thermal stability of the earth. Today, many of these structures sit abandoned on hillsides across Appalachia. Their doors have collapsed. Their roofs have caved in. But the science that made them work has never disappeared. And once you understand it, you'll realize these weren't primitive storage spaces. They were carefully engineered food preservation systems. Systems that solved a problem modern families now outsource to refrigerators, freezers, and constant electricity. Today, we're uncovering the 32 to 40 degree underground system that stored food for up to 8 months without electricity. And it all starts with a mystery hidden beneath your feet. Most people assume the Earth changes temperature the same way the air does. Hot in summer, cold in winter. But a few feet below the surface, something strange happens. The temperature begins to stabilize. The deeper you go, the less the seasons matter. While summer heat can push the surface well above 85 degrees, underground temperatures remain remarkably consistent. This is because soil acts as an enormous thermal battery. It absorbs heat slowly, it releases heat slowly. And once you're deep enough, short-term weather changes barely matter at all. Generations of Appalachian families didn't understand this through laboratory experiments. They understood it through observation. They noticed that caves stayed cool, springs stayed cold, underground spaces felt different. So they started building food storage rooms directly into hillsides. Some were dug into slopes, some were built beneath homes, others were covered with earth and stone. The goal was always the same. Create a space where temperature changed as little as possible throughout the year. Modern agricultural research shows that many storage crops perform best between 32 and 40 degrees Fahrenheit with high humidity levels. Without realizing it, Appalachian builders had created exactly those conditions, not with technology, with geography. And that's where the story becomes even more interesting. Because temperature was only half the system. The real secret was controlling moisture. Imagine storing a carrot for 6 months. Not frozen, not canned, not dehydrated, just stored. The problem isn't only temperature, it's water loss. Vegetables are mostly water. The moment they're harvested, they begin losing moisture. That process never stops. In dry air, carrots become limp. Potatoes shrivel. Beets soften. Food loses quality long before it actually spoils. This is why root cellars weren't simply cold. They were humid. Very humid. Most successful root cellar systems maintained humidity levels between roughly 85 and 95%. That moisture prevented vegetables from drying out. Many Appalachian root cellars used dirt floors, stone walls, and natural earth contact to help maintain these conditions. The earth itself supplied much of the moisture. The result was a remarkably stable environment. Cool, dark, humid. Exactly what many storage crops needed. Today, researchers still recommend similar conditions for carrots, beets, turnips, cabbage, and many other vegetables. But there was another challenge. A root cellar couldn't simply be sealed shut because something invisible was constantly building inside. A gas produced by the food itself. And managing that gas became one of the most important design features of the entire system.
Temperature mattered. Humidity mattered. But neither would have worked for long without ventilation. Because every apple, potato, carrot, cabbage head, and turnip inside a root cellar was still alive. Not alive the way we think of animals being alive, but alive enough to breathe. Every stored crop continues a process called respiration. It slowly consumes oxygen and releases carbon dioxide. The warmer the temperature, the faster this process happens. The colder the temperature, the slower it becomes. That's one reason the 32 to 40 degree Fahrenheit range was so valuable. It dramatically slowed the clock. But even then, gases continued building up. Without airflow, food quality would decline much faster. That's why many Appalachian root cellars included two simple vents, one low, one high. Cold air entered through the lower vent. Warmer air escaped through the upper vent. No fan, no motor, no electricity, just natural airflow. Today, building scientists call this the stack effect. Warm air naturally rises. Cool air naturally falls. Appalachian builders may not have used those terms, but they understood the principle. They could see the results. Food lasted longer, the cellar smelled fresher, mold became less common, and temperatures remained more stable. This simple airflow system helped transform an underground room into a food preservation machine. A machine powered entirely by physics. And once families had the right temperature, humidity, and airflow, they could store an astonishing amount of food. Far more than most modern households keep on hand today.
Now let's talk about the food itself, because this is where the numbers become impressive. Potatoes were often the foundation of winter storage. Under proper conditions, many varieties could remain usable for 5 to 8 months. Some survived even longer when conditions were ideal. Carrots frequently lasted 4 to 6 months. Beets often survived 4 to 6 months. Turnips could remain edible for several months. Cabbage commonly lasted 3 to 6 months. Certain apple varieties could remain usable well into spring. These weren't emergency foods. They were everyday foods. A family might enter winter with hundreds of pounds of stored crops. The root cellar became a living pantry. Each week, food moved from the cellar to the kitchen. Month after month, winter after winter. Imagine walking into January knowing your food supply was still sitting beneath the hillside. Imagine entering February and seeing shelves still filled with produce harvested the previous autumn. Imagine reaching April while still eating potatoes grown the year before. That wasn't unusual. It was normal. The cellar wasn't storing food for a few days. It was bridging entire seasons. And that's what made these systems so valuable. Not because they were old, because they solved a problem every family faced. How do you make a harvest last until the next harvest?
One of the biggest misconceptions about Appalachia is that families simply survived through hard work alone. Hard work mattered, but systems mattered more. Across the Appalachian Mountains, families developed entire networks designed around seasonal survival. The root cellar was only one piece. There were smoke houses, spring houses, drying racks, canning shelves, wood sheds. Each building performed a specific function. Together, they created a complete preservation system. The root cellar handled crops requiring cool temperatures and high humidity. The smokehouse preserved meat. The springhouse protected dairy products. Drying racks preserved beans, apples, herbs, and corn. Nothing existed in isolation. Every structure supported another. And that's one reason these homesteads remained functional long before modern refrigeration. The root cellar wasn't a backup plan. It was infrastructure. The same way a refrigerator is infrastructure today. When modern observers discover an old root cellar hidden behind a farmhouse, they often see a relic. But originally, it was one component of a larger system. A system refined through generations of trial and error. Generations that learned exactly what happened when food spoiled, and exactly what prevented it. The result was knowledge built over decades. Knowledge that quietly worked long before anyone used the term food science.
So if root cellars worked so well, why did they disappear? The answer wasn't because they stopped working. It was because something easier arrived. Electric refrigeration. During the early 20th century, refrigerators became increasingly available. Families no longer needed a dedicated underground structure. Food storage moved into the kitchen. Convenience won. And understandably so. A refrigerator required less planning, less maintenance, less physical labor. Instead of managing hundreds of pounds of food for months at a time, families could simply buy smaller amounts more frequently. The system changed. But something else changed too. The knowledge began disappearing. Builders stopped including root cellars. Younger generations stopped learning how to use them. Many structures were abandoned. Others collapsed. Some were filled in completely. Yet the underlying science never changed. The earth still regulates temperature. Humidity still preserves vegetables. Ventilation still prevents spoilage. The laws of physics didn't disappear. Only the habit of using them. And today, with increasing interest in self-reliance, food security, and resilient home systems, many people are rediscovering what Appalachian families already knew. Standing inside an old root cellar today feels almost strange. Not because the technology is complicated, because it isn't. Stone, earth, airflow, temperature, that's it. No screens, no compressors, no software updates, no monthly utility bill. Just a system working exactly as it was designed to work. For nearly 2 centuries, Appalachian families trusted these underground spaces with something incredibly important, their food supply. And that trust wasn't based on tradition alone. It was based on results. Year after year, harvest after harvest, winter after winter. The root cellar reminds us of something modern life sometimes hides. Not every problem requires a machine. Not every solution requires electricity. Sometimes the most effective systems are the ones that work with nature rather than against it. The earth beneath our feet has been regulating temperature for thousands of years. Appalachian families simply learned how to use that fact to their advantage. And while most of these underground rooms now sit quietly beneath old homesteads, the knowledge behind them is still there, waiting to be rediscovered. In the next video, we'll explore another forgotten Appalachian system that solved a completely different problem. How families preserved meat for months before refrigeration, using a building found on nearly every mountain homestead, the smokehouse. And once you see how it worked, you'll understand why it remained essential for generations.